Welcome in, everybody, to a deep dive into the daily life of a truly fascinating Ramana Maharshi.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at Arthur Osborne's biography of him today.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I think what's so interesting about this particular book is you really get a feel for what life was actually like at the ashram.
Yeah.
It's not just like his teachings,
Yeah.
like the wise sayings and stuff, but like, what did people do all day? How did it work?
Right.
Osborne just paints such a vivid picture, like, these deep spiritual wisdom moments
Yeah.
mixed with like really down-to-earth stuff, like, people from different backgrounds. Like he
Right.
talks about theosophists and missionaries, and then like kids coming into play and bring their toys.
Yeah.
He even talks about monkeys, like getting into mischief around the Maharshi.
Yeah.
It just sounds like such a cool place where like profound insights
Yeah.
met everyday life in this really interesting way.
Yeah. Definitely. It's quite a picture that he paints.
So are you ready to like step back in time and like experience a day at the ashram in
Absolutely.
Tiruvannamalai with Ramana Maharshi?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right.
Let's start with the setting. Osborne describes the ashram as incredibly simple. Just a hall
Okay.
with worn stone floors,
Okay.
basic furniture, the Maharshi's couch.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost austere, but there's just this undeniable sense of serenity that permeates the place.
It's interesting that even though he like attracted people from all over the world,
Yeah.
he chose to live in this like very simple environment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious about how like the daily routine went.
Yeah.
Did that same like simplicity
Yeah.
carry over into how the day unfolded?
Absolutely it did. Imagine this. Each day began at dawn with the chanting of the Vedas, the ancient Hindu scriptures.
Oh, wow.
And traditionally, only certain castes were allowed to listen to these sacred texts. But the Maharshi opened it up to everyone,
Oh, wow.
reflecting his belief in the universality of spiritual truth.
So right from the start, he's like breaking down barriers and challenging like those traditional hierarchies.
Yeah.
It's pretty radical, especially for that time and place.
Mm-hmm.
What happened after the chanting?
So everyone would prostrate themselves before the Maharshi.
Okay.
Now, this might seem at odds with his emphasis on humility, right?
Yeah.
But he viewed it as a way for devotees to surrender their egos
Mm-hmm.
and acknowledge something larger than themselves.
So it's more about like an internal shift in attitude
Yeah,
than an outward display of reverence.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about the internal.
I could see how that would really align with like his teachings on self-inquiry.
Exactly.
Did he ever like say anything about this practice?
He did. He once remarked, "Men prostrate themselves before me, but I know who is submitted in his heart."
Whoa.
It's a powerful reminder that true transformation happens on the inside, not just in outward actions.
Yeah, that's such a great quote. It really like gets to the heart of his philosophy. So after this moment of surrender, like what happened next?
So the Maharshi would slowly walk out of the hall, leaning on his staff, and head towards the cowshed.
He went to a cowshed.
He went to a cowshed.
That's unexpected. What was the significance of that?
So he had a deep connection with animals
Okay.
and saw the divine in all living beings.
Okay.
So this simple act speaks volumes about his humility and his recognition of the interconnectedness of all things.
It's fascinating how even like the smallest details of his daily life seem to like reflect his teachings.
Yeah.
So with the Maharshi at the cowshed, was the ashram pretty quiet until he returned?
Not at all. This was when the devotees started arriving, a real mix of people from all walks of life.
Okay.
You'd have townspeople, wandering ascetics called sadhus, children. Osborne describes this incredible diversity and emphasizes how the Maharshi treated everyone with the same respect and attention, regardless of their background.
That's remarkable. It sounds like the ashram was a very inclusive space.
Yeah, it was.
Were there any like interactions that stood out to you as being particularly revealing about his character?
There are so many. One that comes to mind involves a little girl who brought her doll and had it prostrate before the Maharshi.
Oh.
And he actually picked up the doll and looked at it with genuine interest.
Oh, wow.
It's a small gesture, but it speaks volumes about his tenderness and his ability to connect with people on their own level.
That's so sweet. It's a good reminder that even in the presence of this revered spiritual teacher, there was still room for childlike innocence and playfulness.
Absolutely.
You mentioned earlier that the Maharshi had this sly sense of humor.
Yeah.
Can you share an example of that?
Absolutely. There's a story about an attendant who trying to be helpful, placed an electric fan near the Maharshi during a particularly hot day.
Oh.
Well, he promptly pulled the plug out.
He did.
He did.
I'm surprised he even knew how to do that. What was his reasoning?
With a twinkle in his eye, he said something like, "Why should I have a fan when everyone else is hot?"
Oh.
He simply wouldn't accept any special treatment, even if it meant being uncomfortable.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful example of like his humility and his refusal to place himself above others.
Yes.
It seems like those moments of humor were just like woven throughout the day.
Yeah.
Did Osborne mention any other instances?
Yes. He describes how a monkey once tried to steal a banana,
Okay.
and the Maharshi, with this mischievous grin, whispered to it, "Hurry up before the attendant comes back."
Wow.
It shows his ability to find amusement in everyday situations and not take himself too seriously.
That's hilarious. I can just picture that. So we have this like vibrant mix of like people and routines and these unexpected moments of humor.
Yeah.
But at the heart of it all, like, are his teachings.
Yes.
What was the Maharshi's teaching style like?
So that's a crucial point. He wasn't about preaching doctrines or giving grand lectures. His teaching was much more subtle, focused on guiding individuals inward through self-inquiry. People would come to him with all sorts of questions,
Right.
from profound spiritual dilemmas to everyday concerns.
Yeah.
And he had this remarkable ability to tailor his responses to meet them where they were at.
It sounds like he was a master of recognizing individual needs and providing guidance that truly resonated.
Exactly.
Can you give us an example of how he responded to different people?
Certainly. Osborne mentions a theosophist who asked the Maharshi about seeking guidance from invisible masters.
That's an interesting question. What was his response?
With a touch of wit, he replied, "If they are invisible, how can you see them?" And when the theosophist answered, "In consciousness,"
Yeah.
the Maharshi simply said, "In consciousness, there are no others."
Ah, I see what he's doing. He's like gently redirecting the theosophist's focus inward
Exactly.
toward the true source of knowledge and guidance.
Absolutely.
It's such a subtle but profound teaching. Did he ever encounter people from like different religious backgrounds?
Yes. There's a story about a Christian missionary who visited the ashram and asked the Maharshi if God was personal.
That's a question that has challenged theologians for centuries. I'm really curious to hear how he navigated that one.
Yeah, he did so with incredible skill. So, while staying true to his own understanding of non-duality, the idea that there's ultimately no separation between the self and the divine,
Okay.
he answered in a way that the missionary could grasp. He said, "Yes, he is always the first person, the I, ever standing before you."
Okay.
He went on to explain that when we prioritize worldly things, God seems distant. But when we turn inward, God or the self is all that remains.
It's amazing how he could like bridge those seemingly disparate worldviews and offer an interpretation that like resonated with both. I'm already feeling like we need to pause and reflect on all of this. But before we do, let's finish walking through like the rest of the day at the ashram. What happened after these morning interactions?
So it was lunchtime.
Okay.
Everyone at the ashram, including the Maharshi, would gather for a simple communal meal.
I'm picturing everyone sitting on the floor sharing food. It sounds so grounding and egalitarian.
Absolutely.
Did anything notable happen during these meals?
So there's a story about an attendant who, out of respect, tried to give the Maharshi a larger slice of mango.
Did he accept it?
He did not. In fact, he was quite stern with the attendant and insisted on taking the smallest piece.
Wow.
It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about his commitment to equality and his refusal to be treated differently from anyone else.
His actions always seem to align perfectly with his teachings. What happened after lunch? Did everyone just kind of relax and chat?
Actually, the Maharshi insisted on a mandatory rest period from noon to 2 p.m. for everyone, including himself.
Wow.
Apparently, he initially resisted this, not wanting any special treatment, even if it meant he was exhausted. It took some convincing from his devotees to establish this as part of the routine.
He sounds like he was a strong-willed person.
Oh, absolutely. But beneath that strong will was a deep compassion and a genuine desire to serve others.
Yeah.
He wasn't just imposing rules, he was creating a structure that benefited everyone.
Right. So after the rest period, the devotees would return. What happened in the afternoons?
It was a varied time. Sometimes people would just sit in silence, absorbing the peaceful atmosphere.
Okay.
Others would read or chat amongst themselves. The Maharshi would read newspapers.
Wait, he read the newspaper?
Yeah, he read the newspaper.
That doesn't seem like something a spiritual master would do.
It's true. And it wasn't just like a casual glance.
Yeah.
Osborne describes him as being very attentive, even noticing small details like the postmarks on letters. He was clearly engaged with the world, even while transcending it.
That's such an important point. He wasn't like retreating from life or living in an ivory tower. He was like present in the everyday moments.
Yeah.
But I remember reading that he didn't actually answer any of the letters he received.
That's right.
Is that true?
He saw himself as a conduit for the teachings, not the source of them.
Okay.
So the ashram staff would draft replies,
Yeah.
but he had to approve them before they were sent out. He wouldn't even put his name on anything.
Wow.
Maintaining that impersonal standpoint of an enlightened being.
It all ties back to his core teaching, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Like the ego dissolving
Yeah.
the self as not separate from the divine. It's incredible how this like permeates every aspect of his life, from the smallest interactions to the like grander teachings. So after the letters, what happened next?
So as the day would wind down, the Maharshi would go for another short walk.
Okay.
Even in his later years, when his health was failing, he tried to remain as independent as possible. Then the chanting would resume, marking the beginning of the evening session.
I'm curious about like the atmosphere during those final hours. Did it feel different from the morning?
So Osborne describes it as particularly special. It was kind of a blend of the morning solemnity with the warmth of the earlier interactions. There was a sense of peacefulness that settled over the ashram as the day came to a close.
Okay.
At 6:30, the women would leave, some of the men would stay a bit longer, and then everyone would disperse until the next day.
Wow, what a day.
Yeah.
We've covered so much from dawn to dusk, but I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
We are, and that's the beauty of it. There's always more to explore with the Maharshi's life and teachings.
This has been so enlightening, and I'm sure our listener is eager to hear more. But we'll take a short break here to let everything sink in. When we come back, we'll delve into some of the more extraordinary events that took place at the ashram, like the festivals and the construction of the new hall. You won't want to miss it. Okay, we're back, and I'm ready to hear about those extraordinary events at the ashram. You mentioned festivals, and it's hard to imagine the usually serene ashram bustling with activity.
Yeah, it is quite a contrast, isn't it? Imagine like thousands of devotees flocking to Tiruvannamalai for events like Jayanti, the Maharshi's birthday celebration. The ashram grounds would be packed, filled with this vibrant energy.
That sounds like a lot to handle, even for a spiritual master. Like, how did the Maharshi navigate those huge crowds?
Well, he remained remarkably composed. Osborne describes him sitting aloof, almost regal in his presence, yet still acknowledging familiar faces with warmth and recognition.
So even amidst the chaos, that personal connection remained a priority for him. I'm curious about the logistics of these festivals. Did they involve any specific practices or rituals?
Definitely, there were speeches, offerings. Often they'd compile special souvenirs with writings from devotees. But one practice that stands out to me was the massive communal meals. Everyone, including the Maharshi, would eat together.
Oh, that brings to mind something else Osborne mentioned, feeding the poor. Was that also part of these celebrations?
Yes. It was a regular practice at the ashram, especially during festivals. They would hold these huge meals where anyone could come and eat. They even had multiple shifts to accommodate the sheer number of people.
It's inspiring to see that commitment to service and inclusivity, especially within a spiritual context. It seems like the Maharshi really walked the walk. Speaking of which, I'm curious if his playful side still emerged even during these larger events.
Absolutely. One story that captures this perfectly takes place during Kartikai, another major festival.
Yeah.
So the crowds were so dense that they put railings around the Maharshi to protect him from being jostled.
Okay.
Suddenly, a little boy squeezes through the bars and runs right up to him, eager to show off his new toy.
This sounds adorable.
Wow.
How did the Maharshi react?
Well, he turned to his attendant and said, "See how much use your railing is."
That's a perfect example of his ability to find humor in unexpected places and to not let things get too serious, even during these grand celebrations. It's like he was reminding everyone, even in a subtle way, to embrace the simple joys of life.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful interpretation. And speaking of embracing change, there's another significant event we should discuss. The construction of the new hall and temple.
Yes, the new hall. It marked a new era for the ashram, didn't it?
It did. Remember, the original hall was quite small and intimate. As the number of devotees grew, a larger space became necessary.
And this new hall was built on a grander scale, wasn't it? Constructed according to traditional scriptures with elaborate opening ceremonies.
Yeah, it was quite an undertaking. But what I found intriguing was the Maharshi's initial reluctance to move into the new hall.
Why was that? Wouldn't a bigger, more elaborate space be seen as a positive thing?
You have to remember, the Maharshi was all about simplicity. He had no attachment to material possessions and didn't want any grandeur for himself.
That makes sense. I can see how a lavish new building might clash with his personal philosophy.
Yeah, and many devotees felt the same way. They loved the old hall with its history and the palpable sense of the Maharshi's presence there. The new hall, in contrast, felt cold and impersonal at first.
Yeah, there's a certain nostalgia associated with places, especially ones infused with spiritual significance.
Yeah.
It's understandable that people felt a sense of loss.
Definitely. But ultimately, the new hall became a vital part of the ashram's growth, allowing even more people to experience the Maharshi's teachings.
It's fascinating how these physical spaces can become so intertwined with spiritual journeys. It seems like the ashram's evolution mirrored the Maharshi's teachings in a way, embracing change while staying true to its core principles.
Exactly. And that transition reminds us that even as things evolve, the essence remains the same. It's about finding that balance between continuity and change, which is something we all grapple with in our own lives.
Absolutely. We've journeyed through a typical day at the ashram, witnessed the energy of the festivals, and seen how the physical space evolved. This deep dive has been truly immersive.
It has, and it's important to remember that these are just glimpses into a much larger story. Speaking of which, there's one major event we haven't touched on yet, the Golden Jubilee. 50 years at Tiruvannamalai. That's an incredible milestone.
It's hard to even grasp the significance of 5 decades dedicated to spiritual teaching and service. What was that celebration like?
It was a remarkable event. Imagine September 1946, devotees from all corners of the world gathering to celebrate the Maharshi's presence at Tiruvannamalai.
What a testament to his impact. Were there any particularly memorable moments from the celebration?
There were speeches and offerings, of course, but I think the most powerful aspect of the Golden Jubilee was the outpouring of love and gratitude towards the Maharshi. It must have been incredibly moving to witness.
It's fascinating to think about the Maharshi's perspective during this. How did he experience this momentous occasion?
Well, it's difficult to say for sure. He was always so humble and self-effacing. However, I imagine he felt a deep sense of fulfillment, seeing how his teachings had touched so many lives.
Yeah, it speaks to the universality of his message and the power of a life lived in alignment with one's truth.
Absolutely. The Golden Jubilee wasn't just about celebrating the past. It was a symbol of the Maharshi's enduring impact, an impact that continues to resonate with people today.
It really is inspiring, and I think it serves as a reminder that true enlightenment isn't about escaping the world, but about engaging with it in a mindful and compassionate way.
I completely agree. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. From the simple routines to the grand celebrations, we've gotten a real sense of the depth and richness of Ramana Maharshi's life.
It's been fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think it's given us a lot to contemplate. Before we wrap things up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on the Maharshi's legacy and what our listener can take away from this deep dive.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the life of Ramana Maharshi. From the simple routines to the grand celebrations, we've really gotten a sense of the depth and richness of this man's life. It's been fascinating, and I think it's given us a lot to contemplate.
Yeah, it really has been. As we wrap up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on the Maharshi's legacy and what our listener can take away from this deep dive.
Okay, that's a great question. I think it all comes down to this. The path to self-realization doesn't require these grand gestures or these complicated rituals. It's more about cultivating stillness, turning inward, and recognizing the divine presence that already exists within each of us.
Yeah, beautifully said. It's like simplifying, quieting the mind, and connecting with that deeper truth. And the Maharshi's life is a testament to the fact that it is possible.
It is.
No matter who we are, where we come from.
Yeah, it's a path that's available to every single one of us.
So if you're feeling inspired to learn more about Ramana Maharshi, I definitely encourage you to explore his teachings further. read his words, perhaps even visit his ashram in Tiruvannamalai if you feel drawn to it. It's a journey worth taking.
It is. And as you delve deeper, remember that the true essence of Ramana Maharshi's message is not found in books or in lectures, but in the quiet space of your own heart.
That is the perfect note to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and presence of Ramana Maharshi. Until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.